Hello, and welcome to Tangled Twists. I'm Lissa, and this is another installment of my series, Sewing Made Simple. In my first installment of Sewing Made Simple, we discussed 3 stitches that are used to make seams and connect fabric together. But there's a lot of other stitches that you can use for sewing for various purposes, and today we're going to cover 3 of those. We're going to talk about Overcast Stitch, Buttonhole Stitch, and Slip Stitch, which is also sometimes called Ladder Stitch. Overcast Stitch is used to protect the edges of fabrics. Buttonhole Stitch also is used for protecting edges, but it's used for protecting edges in a much more specific way that's designed specifically for buttonholes so that when you have something that's frequently coming in contact with that edge, it stays whole and strong for longer. The final stitch is Slip Stitch, and this one, even if you intend to do most of your sewing by machine, slip stitch is a stitch you're going to need to know. It is commonly used in garment making. When you apply a lining to a garment, you have to stitch around the edges, right? So those all get turned to the inside, but you have to leave an opening to do that turning, and you have to close that opening up. So to do that, you typically use slip stitch. It's also used if you were turning, say, a blanket or a pillowcase that didn't maybe have a zipper. It's used often in making toys, so it's an important stitch to know even if it doesn't get a whole lot of use. So let's dive into it. Our first stitch is Overcast Stitch. It's used to help protect raw edges from fraying. You can see that along the cut edges of the fabric, loose threads appear and can be pulled free. On the inside of a garment, this can be problematic for a number of reasons. First, if the threads are long enough, you can get tangled in them. Second, if the fraying is really bad, it can compromise the structure of your seam. And third, it just looks really ugly. So we can use Overcast Stitch to help with that. Overcast Stitch is done just like Whip Stitch, except that you're not connecting anything to anything else. The thread wraps around the cut edge of the fabric and protects the edges. You can make the stitches long or short and space them as widely or as closely as you want. I tend to end up with really small stitches that sit close together, but it is completely okay to use bigger, more spaced stitches. In all cases, you can see that the raw edge has been secured and that no loose threads are coming out. Our next stitch is Buttonhole Stitch, which is designed to protect edges that are going to get wear, like for buttonholes. To complete this stitch, you anchor your thread on the wrong side of the fabric and work on the right side. Stick your needle through the fabric and bring it out on the open side. Then you wrap the thread once or twice around the needle and pull the thread through. The wrap creates a little knot at the edge of the fabric. The knot takes the wear of a button passing through the buttonhole and extends the life of the buttonhole. You continue the same way all the way around the opening. You'll notice that I'm not packing the stitches right next to each other. You don't need a million stitches here. The temptation is to try to make it look like a modern buttonhole. But modern buttonholes are done with a very tight zigzag stitch because it's easy for a machine to do. The stitches are made and then the buttonhole is opened, which is not the case with a handmade buttonhole. See how the knots line up on the fabric edge? That's what you're looking for. Your bonus stitch today is Blanket Stitch, which is the sister stitch to Buttonhole Stitch. You work both from the right side and bring your needle through the fabric and out the opening. However, in Blanket Stitch, you don't wrap the thread around the needle. You catch the thread loop so that it sits along the cut edge. It works more like Overcast Stitch to protect edges, and you can use this for buttonholes, but it isn't quite as sturdy and won't last as long with wear. Finally, we're going to talk about Slip Stitch, which is also called Ladder Stitch. This is the one stitch that you need to know even if you intend to do most of your sewing by machine, because it is commonly used to close linings. I like to anchor my thread within the seam allowance and bring it out through the pressed edge. Working on the right side, I take a tiny bit of fabric across from where the needle came out. Then I move to the other side and insert the needle even with where it came out initially, and then take another bite of fabric. I'm not pulling the threads tight here, so I can show you how it looks as you go. It's called ladder stitch because it looks like you're making the rungs of a ladder as you work it. When you pull the thread up, it closes the opening and makes it look like the seam has been continued. It's used to close linings and openings in garments and toys because it allows you to invisibly complete the seam. You can leave a good bit open on a lining to turn through and then use slip stitch to close it up. And there you have it, 3 more stitches to add to your hand sewing arsenal. Hopefully they help you make your hand sewing go a little bit easier and maybe even help your machine sewing if you do need to close up some linings. As always, if there are any techniques that you would like me to go over, please drop a comment. I am more than happy to help you learn anything that you might care to learn about sewing. I love it and I want you to love it as much as I do. So stick around. I've got more fun and interesting things coming up, and I will see you soon.